I have read many visual novels throughout the years, from well-known titles like the Science Adventure series to more obscure ones like Marco and the Galaxy Dragon, to even some safer work Patch the Rogues. But recently I found a visual novel with absolutely no digital footprint, a visual novel that literally no one is talking about, a visual novel named Staria. Star is a work-in-progress visual novel with placeholder assets, and it shows some promise with its good character establishment, despite the occasional bug, typo, or strange sentence flow. While the overall experience was short and many choices didn't actually matter too much, I had a better time with Staria than I did with the Good Deeds arc with Marco and the Galaxy Dragon and any part of Aya Ala Cthulhu. Not to mention, I like how fast and to the point the opening was. Like, I get it. Some titles are trying to establish the world and shit, but doesn't need to take 3 hours. Quick and to the point openings like Sengoku Rans and Marco the Galaxy Dragon are way more pleasurable to read than the light novels things like Riddle Joker and Our World Is Ended forces you to read. Of course, the longer openings do allow the world to be more established, and unfortunately the setting for Staria is not really that clear as of the prologue. To be honest, I know almost nothing about the world. We have some kind of magic system or high-tech things posing as low-tech, swords are still used as weaponry, but it's not clear if it's like a normal sword or some kind of high-tech fantasy sword. For the sake of the video, I will assume that we are in a fantasy setting. From the prologue, it's pretty easy to see that Staria will be a character-driven story, so let's have a look at these characters. The story of Staria is told from the perspective of Rhett, a young bodyguard turned mercenary for Durathin. Part asshole, part pathetic loser, with a pinch of shonen protag, Rhett works perfectly fine as a protagonist. Not as colorful of a protagonist as Okabe or Rand, but not completely boring like Satoru or most light novel trash. With many great protagonists, we get to see a sense of what they like and don't like, something that makes them more human rather than a piece of cardboard. For example, Rand loves collecting seashells more than anything else and hates the mistreatment of women more than anything else. Okabe loves DK Pepper and hates being alone. Despite the huge options of things that Red can say, it's hard to gather things that make him not a cardboard cutout. The only things that really exist right now is how he fixates on the loss of his canteen. It shows a lot about a character that when recalling a near-death scenario, survival is not the big deal, but the loss of something that should be pointless is. I hope that this is developed upon more and doesn't have some kind of cringy overdone reason, like his mother used to make canteens or something like that. Maybe I'm getting a bit tunnel vision here, and Red actually feels this way about all his equipment, being some kind of hoarder that grows overly attached to mundane objects and equipment. Maybe add some more emphasis of him fiddling with his equipment at the opening, or make reference to how he has multiple canteens. But let's not focus on the what ifs. Overall, Ray works really well as a protag, with nothing too bad about him, and what seems to be like the start of something interesting. Honestly, Tree is my least favorite character from the prologue. I assume she's supposed to be the not-so-perfect girl archetype, but I don't really see it. I mean, maybe the not-so-perfect side is yet to reveal itself, but there's not really much there without it. She is confident, and that's kind of it. She is never really even thrown off by Red's remarks, either taking control of the situation herself or just playing along with what Red is doing. There is some air of mystery to her, with Alice seemingly knowing her from before the story, but it's not really that great. Maybe add some character flaw that's a huge shift to Tree personally, contrasting to the perfect aura she gives off, like how Makise is an image board gremlin, or the fake nature of Ayase. Really, there's not much to say about her other than she kind of appears. Typoed in the character tab as James, Jane doesn't really play a big role in the prologue, but at least she gets more characterization than Tree. From the short couple minutes we do get her character, I can tell Jane is impulsive, headstrong, and an animal lover. We are explicitly told about the animal thing from Mouse, but if you must glitch and skip that text box, you could tell by Jane's dialogue about the hunter mistreating his pets from the passive option. The line also shows how she's headstrong, since her response to being pummeled is not fear or any other signs of backing down. Instead, Jane talks about the whole thing with conviction and confidence, and it's pretty easy to see how impulsive Jane is due to the fact that she fought on number 3 to 1, because she didn't like what some people were doing. The line about reminding the hunter that he's an ass shows that Jane provoked the hunter at the very least, if not straight up attacked him and his 2 other friends. Overall, I like Jane from the very little we saw of her. Her characterization is squeezed pretty well into a few lines that she has. finally, we have what's probably the strongest character in Staria, Alice. Alice really plays into the whole childish childhood friend character archetype. And while not explicitly a childhood friend, it is definitely clear that Alice and Rhett has some long, ongoing, close relationship. We get explicit lines about their past, like the mention of the past job, but the interactions between Rhett and Alice also really show this off. Like the fact that Alice is the only character that Rhett's not extremely awkward around, she's the only character that he jokes with, and the reaction Alice has to Rhett being injured really hints to the deeper past between them. The childish nature oozes out of Alice in every single text box and action she does, and was the highlight of the prologue. Honestly, I could do what I did for Jane's one line of text, for literally all of Alice's lines, but we would be here all day if I did. The only problem I have with her character is that it seems that Alice really has no other interests than Rhett, but maybe that could be explored more later. It's only the prologue, and to be fair, Maori was not much different throughout the beginning of Steins Gate also. Overall, Alice is a great character with so much potential, and has a great character flowing through every line of dialogue, and is by far my favorite in the demo. Some of the writing can be awkward at times, with some sentences not flowing right, but the overall flow of the story works. Rhett gets a request to work for Dervin Durinthia, so he goes to the city of Stumaton and waits for further instructions at the gate. There he meets Tree for the first time and re-encounters Alice. They get to know each other and eat some sweet rolls, and then go looking for their last partner, Jane, who Alice met earlier. They find her in the town square and she's getting pummeled. They help her and they go to Durin for the job. To be honest, Staria opens a lot like a session 1 of D&D, but more than anything. The party gets together, shows a bit off the character quirks, then they get to the quest giver. But honestly, I'm so glad it's just a fantasy and not some kind of isekai bullshit in a fantasy world. There are a few issues I had with the main story, mainly the whole Jane fighting thing. Why are there people cheering on for a bloody fight where one person is against 3? Wouldn't people try to mind their own business or try to enjoy the festival, or even just, call the guards? It's also kind of weird to me that they make a ring around the fight like they're in some movie about surviving high school. And the fight itself was written in a really weird way, more specifically the passive option to deal with the fight. Rhett decides to watch and wait to see what happens while Jane gets destroyed in the fight. Alice and Tree stop the fight by talking to the main hunter, and Tree punches him. Then we get a choice on how to act after that. If passive is chosen, the scene is described a second time, but with less detail. So are we to assume the first part never happened? Is the passive choice backwards in time? If it is, shouldn't it be in the last choice, or be the result of doing nothing, and all the other options should be in the do something tree? In the first chapter, choices don't matter much, but I hope they are counting towards some kind of system in the background already if the creator of Staria is deciding to go multiple routes. Having lots of choices does keep the reader engaged, but if the choices mean nothing, it just becomes frustrating and feel like a waste of time for everyone. So far, all the choices felt meaningful, giving us some kind of characterization with each one, so it's not really a problem right now, just more of a food for thought. While there's not a lot of content so far, I think there's enough hints in the characterization to theorycraft what the game would generally have. From the placeholder backgrounds and small hints, swords, hunters with pets, magic letters, Staria takes place in a fantasy, swords, and swordsy kind of world. From this we can get what kind of traditional fantasy, class, or archetypes the characters may have as their roles. With Rhett straight up saying that his role is of a bodyguard of some sort and the use of a sword, it is safe to assume that he's a frontliner and maybe some kind of defender of sorts, although he does lack the shield for that role and he does seem pretty frail. Regardless, he's definitely some kind of trained fighter that would fit the role of a frontliner, being like a fighter in D&D or a warrior in WoW. Tree actually has some evidence for being written to fit a traditional fantasy class, despite there not being that much characterization in her text. It is implicitly and explicitly stated that Tree is a people's person, meaning she's a more cunning class, rather than a frontliner like Rhett. She also has some sort of mysterious air to her, making a rogue a pretty obvious choice of class. Not to mention, she also did what could have been a sneak attack to the hunter. Although, Tree also just seems to know things. She knew that Jane would be in the town square, and that strange line about feeling they knew the person in trouble. They also didn't know Jane yet at that point. This could mean that Tree might have some sort of precognition or magic power, but this doesn't really fit with her description of her role being a people's person, unless maybe it's some sort of empathy-based magic. Jane with her affinity to nature can easily be seen as any like those nature classes, so like a druid or shaman or ranger, but that's looking too much on the surface level. Usually people who fit this class archetype are wise, so it's possible that she's just a nature-loving frontline take. Her scrappy nature and impulsive does line up with barbarians pretty well, but if this was the case, the party would be lacking some sort of magic in the team composition. But maybe she could just be like a hybrid kind of like spell frontliner. Really, I can see Jane work in any other class, other than something arcane like a mage. As much as I can say about the character of Alice, I can't really see her as a fantasy class, which is not a bad thing. Alice feels like she's written to be Alice, not some sort of stereotype of a fantasy archetype. The closest we get is her nursing an injured Rhett, but there's nothing magical as such with that. Technically, anybody could have checked on him. The scene was there to establish the history between Alice and Rhett, so I really got nothing for her. Maybe she's a healer, maybe something else completely different. But I don't know, I could be completely wrong. Staria's setting could be completely non-magical, with some sort of reverted high-tech akin to Horizon Zero Dawn minus the guns. I doubt their roles would actually be a hard-set class, but like, it would have abilities that would probably fit the fantasy archetype of like a rogue or a druid or a warrior. Maybe the whole idea of an RPG party is not even where the main cast is even heading. But what I do know for sure is that I enjoyed the Staria demo with its placeholder models and everything, and I'm excited to see where the story goes on from here.